At around 2 o'clock on the afternoon of Thursday, November 6th, 2025, the Mohave County Sheriff's Office received a call for help from the Hualapai Nation. A 65-year-old man had slipped at Guano Point on the western rim of the Grand Canyon and fallen over the edge. He was found about 130 feet below on a slope of loose, broken rock. He was already dead. His name has never been publicly released. What is known is where he was standing, what the ground beneath him was like, and what it took to bring him back up. When most people picture the Grand Canyon, they picture Grand Canyon National Park, the South Rim, the visitor centers, the National Park Service rangers. Guano Point is not that. It sits on the Hualapai Reservation in a section of the canyon known as Grand Canyon West, land managed entirely by the Hualapai Nation, a sovereign tribal government that operates its own tourism destinations independent of the National Park Service. This is the same broader stretch of canyon that's home to the Grand Canyon Skywalk, the glass-bottomed horseshoe platform that draws visitors specifically for the experience of walking out over open air with nothing but glass beneath their feet. Guano Point sits nearby, and it draws its own steady stream of visitors for a different reason: unobstructed, sweeping views of the Colorado River winding through the canyon floor, with no glass, no barrier, nothing between the visitor and the landscape at all. That absence of barrier is not an oversight. It's part of what makes Guano Point what it is. Photographs from the scene, published alongside coverage of this incident, show exactly what the terrain looks like: exposed trails and viewpoints with no protective railing, running right along the edge of a drop that falls in places well over 100 feet onto broken rock below. Grand Canyon West markets itself in part on exactly this kind of raw, unmediated access to the landscape. For most visitors, most of the time, that's precisely the draw: the feeling of standing at the true, unfiltered edge of one of the natural world's most dramatic formations, without a barrier between you and the view. For one 65-year-old man on a Thursday afternoon in November, it was the reason there was nothing to catch him. On the afternoon of Thursday, November 6th, 2025, a 65-year-old man stood at Guano Point on the western rim of the Grand Canyon, on land belonging to the Hualapai Nation. The ground under his feet was the same ground that draws people here every day: an open, unguarded edge with no railing, no barrier, nothing between solid rock and a sheer drop. Below him, the canyon fell away in broken shelves and loose scree. Sometime around 2 o'clock, he lost his footing. One ordinary slip, the kind that happens on sidewalks and wet floors every day of the year, and there was nothing left to stop him. He went over the edge. He fell approximately 130 feet. His body came to rest on a steep slope of loose, broken rock, a scree pile formed by centuries of the canyon's own erosion. By the time anyone could reach him, he was already dead. The Hualapai Nation operates its own tribal police, fire, and security personnel at Grand Canyon West, and they were the first responders on scene. But recovering a body from 130 feet down a canyon wall onto a slope of unstable, loose rock is not a task most tribal or municipal departments handle routinely. It requires specialized technical rescue equipment and rope specialists, resources the Hualapai Nation does not maintain in-house for this kind of operation. So, at 2 p.m., the call went out to Mohave County. The Mohave County Sheriff's Office search and rescue team responded to assist, bringing exactly the kind of technical rope expertise the recovery demanded. They were joined at the scene by the Hualapai Tribal Police Department, Hualapai Nation Fire, and Grand Canyon West Security, a multi-agency response spanning tribal and county jurisdictions, coordinated quickly despite the overlapping authority of a recovery happening on sovereign tribal land. What followed was not a simple retrieval. It was a technical rescue operation, and understanding what that actually involves says a great deal about why a fall like this, survivable in height by some measures, but not in outcome, requires the kind of specialized response usually associated with mountaineering accidents rather than a scenic overlook. Search and rescue personnel set up what the sheriff's office described as a lowering and raising system, a technical rope rig anchored at the rim, engineered to lower trained rope technicians down the canyon wall under controlled tension, and then raise both the rescuer and the recovered person back up along the same line. This is not something improvised on the spot. It requires anchoring points solid enough to bear the combined weight of a rescuer, safety backups, and eventually a loaded rescue basket, all rigged before anyone begins the actual descent. Rope technicians descended the steep canyon wall using this system, working their way down 130 feet of exposed, uneven rock face to reach the scree slope where the man had come to rest. Once they reached him, the job shifted from access to extraction. The man's body was carefully secured into a rescue basket, and the same rope system used to lower the technicians was reconfigured to raise the basket back up the cliff face, with technicians managing the ascent to keep the load stable against the loose, shifting rock of the scree slope below and the exposed wall above. Photographs released by the Mohave County Sheriff's Office Search and Rescue Team show exactly this: a rescuer being lowered over the canyon's edge, the basket system staged at the rim, the technical machinery of a rope rescue operation set up against the backdrop of one of the most photographed landscapes in the American Southwest. Once safely raised, the man's body was transported to the Mohave County Medical Examiner's office. It's worth pausing on the specific mechanics of what happened here, because a 130-foot fall onto a scree slope is a different kind of event than the sheer 380-foot cliff drops described in some other Grand Canyon area incidents, and understanding that difference matters. A scree slope is not a vertical wall. It is loose, broken, sloped rock, the kind of surface a body can tumble down rather than simply plummet past. In some circumstances, a slope like that can actually reduce the force of an impact compared to a fall onto a flat, hard surface, because the fall is partially absorbed and redirected across a longer, sloped distance, rather than ending in a single sudden stop. But it is also specifically unstable terrain, sharp, shifting, broken rock fragments that offer no secure footing, no handhold, nothing to arrest a slip once it begins. This is precisely the kind of surface that makes an edge at Guano Point so unforgiving. It isn't a clean vertical drop that a person could theoretically see coming and step back from. It's an edge where the ground itself, right up to the point of no return, can behave unpredictably underfoot. Loose gravel, unstable rock, a slope that gives way rather than holding firm. Whatever caused the man to lose his footing at Guano Point that Thursday afternoon, the geology of the location itself, an unguarded edge, giving way to exactly this kind of loose, sloped, unstable rock, meant that a single slip carried consequences that a stable, solid trail surface would not have produced. This fall did not happen in a vacuum. In the same reporting cycle that covered the Guano Point incident, multiple news outlets noted that it followed closely on the heels of another Grand Canyon area tragedy just weeks earlier. In September 2025, a Colorado man died when his vehicle went over the rim of Grand Canyon National Park near the South Kaibab trailhead, plunging hundreds of feet with him as the car's sole occupant. Two fatal falls at two different locations, under two very different circumstances, within a matter of weeks. One a vehicle going over an unprotected overlook, the other a pedestrian slipping at an unguarded viewpoint on tribal land. Different mechanisms, but a shared thread. Exposed edges in a landscape defined by exactly the kind of dramatic, sudden elevation change that draws millions of visitors every year, and unforgiving the moment something goes wrong. Grand Canyon West markets its unfenced, open-edge viewpoints as part of the authentic experience of the canyon, and for the overwhelming majority of the millions of people who visit every year, that experience is completely safe, provided a basic level of caution is maintained. But the absence of a railing at a location like Guano Point is not a design flaw to be worked around. It is the actual condition of the terrain, and it needs to be treated accordingly. Stay well back from any unguarded edge, further back than feels necessary. Without a railing to mark a clear boundary, it's easy to misjudge exactly where stable ground ends, particularly on terrain that transitions from solid rock to loose gravel or scree without an obvious visual change. Be especially cautious on loose or broken rock near any edge. Scree and gravel are common at the rim of the Grand Canyon precisely because of ongoing erosion, and this same loose material can shift or give way underfoot with no warning, unlike a solid rock surface. Avoid moving toward the edge for photographs. A significant number of canyon rim falls across many separate incidents at both National Park Service and tribal land involve a visitor stepping closer to an edge specifically to get a picture or a better view, a momentary decision that trades a small improvement in a photograph for a very large increase in risk. Understand that unfenced does not mean less dangerous, it means the opposite. Every barrier removed from a viewpoint transfers the entire responsibility for safety onto the individual visitor's judgment and footing, with no backup if either one fails for even a moment. The Mohave County Sheriff's Office ended its public statement about this recovery with a simple line: "Our condolences are with his family. Please respect their privacy during this time." No name was released. No details about who he was, why he had come to Guano Point, or what he had been doing there that afternoon. What remains is the outline of an ordinary moment that ended in tragedy. A man standing at an unguarded edge, a single slip, and 130 feet of open air beneath him. The rope teams who brought him back up did their job with the same technical precision used in mountaineering rescues around the world. It just wasn't the kind of job that could change the outcome. That had already been decided in the moment his foot lost its grip. Guano Point is still open. The views are still unobstructed. The edge is still exactly where it was that Thursday afternoon. That's what makes it beautiful. It's also exactly what makes it dangerous.